Katerina, please open our event.
Okay, so we can start. Welcome to all participants of today's meeting at Diye-Slovo studio. My name is Katerina Malachova. Here I represent the International Certificate Program of Jewish Studies. And today I was presented an honor to say some opening words at this meeting. Today's session of Diye-Slovo studio is dedicated to the presentation of a report on anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine over the past 3 years, conducted by the Union of Councils for Jews in the former Soviet Union, an American Jewish human rights organization. Studio Diye-Slovo is proud to once again host the presentation of these reports, which is happening not for the first time. These are very crucial reports, and they are vital for understanding of the level of anti-Semitism in our country. The people usually know about the level of anti-Semitism in our country because of that reports, far beyond from the Ukrainian borders. And I need to say that it is particularly relevant today after the events of 7th of October and amidst the war with Russia. So it is my pleasure to introduce Vyacheslav Likhachev, who is a well-known scholar in the field of xenophobia studies, an expert of the Center for Civil Liberties, and he is the author of that report, and also his colleagues from the Union of Councils for Jews in the former Soviet Union. Dear Vyacheslav, your turn.
Thank you, dear Katya. Thank you, Lena, and thank for the organizing of this event. First of all, I prefer to give floor, the screen for the representatives and leaders of the Union of Councils for Jews in the former Soviet Union to tell a little more about the organization and about our intention doing this report and about the context. Why do we think it is important? Why do we think it is important now? And what do we think to do about it? And then I'll try to represent the main findings of our research. I will share the link to the report itself in our chat box a little bit later. And now, I don't know, Paul, probably, or Nastya, who will take the mic. Paul, please.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, UCSJ has been in the business of monitoring anti-Semitism for decades, anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union. So I thought it would be fascinating to publish Slava's study, which looks at anti-Semitism, compares anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine since the start of the full-scale offensive 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago. So the results were, of course, fascinating, and I'm looking forward, like everyone else, to hearing Slava present them.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Nastya.
Yes, my name is Anastasia Siva. I'm with UCSJ, and that was the idea that as Paul said, that for decades our organization has been working with the refuseniks back in the 70s, with human rights groups in the early 90s and the early 2000s, from the area of our interest from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan. And this time of the world development, we have felt that it is very important to look at the perspective in two countries from the angle of anti-Semitism, and probably reviewing the results of this study, maybe find some ways for future development of the scholars or think tanks who work in this perspective to try to build at least a dialogue between think tanks on this matter between two countries. Whether it's demanded or not in the nearest future, we hope that at some point we would need some dialogue, and through this avenue of research, we hope that it will too bring to some first steps of some kind of a reconciliation of cooperation, at least in this field. And yes, Slava, thank you very much, and we're looking forward to your results.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Nastya. And what I want to stress in this introductional part from my side is that Union of Councils is a really important example of how the Jewish values are related to the human rights agenda. And if the organization was created in the frames of struggle for Soviet Jews during the Soviet times, it finds its place in the world of civil society organizations supporting human rights work all over the former Soviet Union. I represent Center for Civil Liberties, well, with Nobel Peace Prize winner organization of 2022. And our organization was created in 2007. And probably the first our project was about xenophobia and monitoring in Ukraine. And we began our work in partnership on the Union of Councils. So for me, it's important to keep this partnership and our cooperation, probably to increase this work in future. So from Jewish point of view, the human rights agenda is related to the Jewish values, and from the human rights point of view, the issue of anti-Semitism is extremely important. It kind of situation with the Jewish community is a situation when you can see the level of human rights situation in country in general. And during last year, or almost year and a half, we have seen that the level of anti-Semitism all over the world became dramatic. The wave of anti-Jewish hatred began from the October 7th. October 7th is something which the Western part of the world haven't seen for decades, probably since the World War II. In this context, the anti-Semitism brings a lot of attention of Jewish organizations, of international community, but in the level of anti-Semitism, the issue of anti-Semitism in our part of the world became a little bit like out of the frames of this agenda, partly because our part of the world is not, was not, I'm sorry, yes, probably because our part of the world, and not only post-Soviet countries, but Eastern European post-communist parties, countries as well, they are a little bit out of the Western anti-Israel and anti-Zionist agenda of so-called new anti-Semitism, which began to appear to be the most dangerous and the most problematic format of modern anti-Semitism, at least since the Second Intifada for last quarter of a century almost. But also the problem of anti-Semitism in our countries is just became invisible for different reasons. If several years ago issue of anti-Semitism in Ukraine was very popular, or at least it was in an agenda of discussions of international organizations of the Jewish community monitoring and research centers, partly because the issue of anti-Semitism became part of Russian efforts to create a bad image of contemporary Ukraine. But during last years, since the beginning of the large-scale aggression, even Russia doesn't use really this instrumentalization of this issue against Ukraine. Ukrainian Jewish community organizations, which were active in monitoring of anti-Semitism before the large-scale war for last 3 years, definitely have much more important things to do. I remember I worked on the monitoring of preparing of the annual report on anti-Semitism of the year of 2021 in February of 2022. But of course, I just had not succeed to publish it before the February 24. And after February 24, of course, the general situation, the general context was changed dramatically, and Vote of Ukraine, our organization, became work on evacuation and emergency support for vulnerable groups and so on. And of course, the issue of anti-Semitism just was out of our priorities for last 3 years. The same were the situation with another Ukrainian Jewish community organization, the United Jewish Community of Ukraine, which also has prepared the annual reports on anti-Semitism several years before the large-scale aggression, and their community center in Dnipro, the largest community center in Ukraine, became just a hub where hosting the IDPs and humanitarian aid since the beginning of large aggression. So for the Ukrainian Jewish organization, the issue of anti-Semitism just became less important than our existence and our attempt to survive the large-scale Russian aggression, where we work together with the whole Ukrainian society without any specific Jewish part of agenda. From the other hand, the Russian Jewish organizations, the last one which tried to prepare the monitoring on anti-Semitism annual reports based on monitoring of anti-Semitism in Russia, the Russian Jewish Congress, they just stopped. First, they just stopped this work to be public in 2021 was the last annual report, which was published by them. In 2022, they just stopped this work. I don't know exactly, but I guess because they began to fix more and more anti-Semitic statements from the country's leadership. And they decided better not to make a point on this issue. So to conclude, we just don't have any systematic information, fact-based, monitoring-based, or any information at all about anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine since the beginning of large-scale war. And it is so different with the other, even European countries, where anti-Semitism became a major issue of high priority after October 7th, that this gap of lack of information, this lack of knowledge about the anti-Semitism is just, well, at least strange. And if you, I don't know, probably some of you already have seen the report. If no, I've shared the link to the Russian and English versions of the report in the chat box. And later I'll share the Ukrainian translation, which was published on the Center for Civil Liberties website. If you have seen, you've probably could have an impression that there were major significant changes. There was dramatic dynamics in anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine since the beginning of large-scale aggression. I'll try to conclude how this dynamics looks for me in this presentation, but of course I will not try to retell of the whole report. I advise you to introduce yourself with the text. It is a long text, and I will not try to tell even major facts from the report. I'll try to make some accents on the topics which seem important for me. And the last introductory words is are about this I don't know, unification or this balance. Why do we talk about anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine together? Now it's extremely strange to talk of anything in Russia and Ukraine together, because the situation in the countries are totally different. The social context, the dynamics, whatever, and even Russian and Ukrainian, even human rights defenders usually don't sit down together in any audience. It's extremely problematic. We can understand why. I feel that this lack of communication is bad for us, is bad for human rights community, international human rights community, but it is like things happen, and I'm afraid we can lose the understanding of the situation in Russia if we will not communicate with representatives of civil society from Russia. And we already lost some understanding of the situation. But and I think it's crucial. We need to understand what's happened inside Russia. We need to know, even if we estimate Russia as an enemy, we need to know our enemy, not to deny its existence because it exists. But it's very interesting. I had several conversations with the representatives of the Jewish community of Russia and Russian human rights organizations, like research interviews during preparation of the report. And no one from those with whom I talked let me to mention them. All of them said that please just don't mention that even you had fact of communication with us. And I understand why. But why I think it is important to talk about Russia and Ukraine, it is strange. It sounds strange. It sounds counterintuitive. But before the large-scale aggression, even after the beginning of the Russian aggression in 2014, even despite the difference of the social political contexts, Russia became a dictatorship not in 2022, and the Ukrainian Democratic Society became intent to be part of the European political and social space, not in 2022, but the anti-Semitism or major trends on major manifestations of anti-Semitism, the general characteristics of anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine were very similar before the large-scale aggression. And this similarity became more visible or significant if we compare the situation in Russia and Ukraine with the Western European situation or with the situation in the United States. Here, in our post-Soviet countries, we appeared in totally different contexts, and sometimes it was even difficult to describe it. When I attended some international meetings on anti-Semitism in Berlin, Vienna, or in Jerusalem, sometimes people just haven't believed that the situation in our countries, in Russia, in Ukraine, are as I've described them, because in Western countries, this new anti-Israel type of anti-Semitism became the disaster. And after October 7th, it became a catastrophic disaster, but it was a trend in these directions it was a long-term trend since the year of 2000 at least. And in our countries, we didn't had, we haven't it previously, before the large-scale aggression, this new anti-Semitism almost at all, for different reasons, because all this anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist propaganda reminded for post-Soviet population the old school Soviet propaganda, and people just don't believe it, don't take it seriously. It's was something which was which sounds false even in Soviet period, and it was just had no chances to revival in our times, for different reasons, because our university intellectual culture is not leftish as it is in the intellectual university circles in campuses in the United States or in Western Europe. For different reasons, population felt more sentiments with Israel, not with the Palestinian people. We don't had such diasporas from the Middle East, from the Muslim or from the Arabic countries, which they have in European countries. So we even don't familiar with what Palestinian agenda is, what it looks like. So for different reasons, our countries had much more similar than different, and were differentiated from the Western context. We had this old fashioned style anti-Semitism. We had some neo-Nazi street gangs, even violent, especially 15, 20 years ago, when neo-Nazi skinhead movement was a kind of a fashion for our teenagers. We have this traditional religious anti-Judaism propaganda from the church, from the religious circles, or from neo-paganic movement, but it isn't like the contemporary anti-Israel mass culture in Western Europe. So our context was very different, and the trends were similar, both in Ukraine and in Russia, and the maximum of numbers in anti-Semitic crimes, anti-Semitic violence, or anti-Semitic acts of vandalism were, well, like 20 years ago or 17, 16 years ago. I will not tell you a lot of numbers or statistics. You will find it in the report. I'll just name some trends. And both in Ukraine and in Russia for last 10 years, or a little bit more than 10 years, we had less and less anti-Semitic cases in terms of anti-Semitic hate crimes. From other hand, in Russia and Ukraine, we had this type of public culture which made possible some very open and radical anti-Semitic statements in mass media, in political propaganda sometimes, which probably will not appear in public in Western European countries, just because of the different level of understanding of what hate speech is. So we just were in the other context, and our major trends in regarding the anti-Semitism were more or less the same, and the situation changed dramatically after the beginning of the large-scale aggression. For last 3 years, we have very significant shift of the situation, both in Russia and in Ukraine, but now in different directions. In Russia, we have more cases of anti-Semitic, even vandalism, more cases of anti-Semitic violence. We have cases of anti-Semitic terrorism, which we hadn't in Russia for years. The last cases, which we could call terroristic acts, were from neo-Nazi violent groups like 10 years ago. But now we have in Russia Islamistic anti-Semitic terrorism, and it is something new. and not only in the republics, in the regions of Russia with the Muslim majority of population, but in central Russia as well, in Moscow itself, or in some other regions of European part of Russia. We also have information about at least attempt of anti-Semitic terroristic acts, and it is something new. It brings Russia in a new situation. It shows like the part of the world where Russia belongs now, and it is not where it was even 3 years ago. We had very crucial in terms of scale anti-Semitic riots in Russia, in Northern Caucasus after the October 7th. And we have seen that October 7th affects the situation with anti-Semitism in Russia. And it is something new. Previously, every military operation against terroristic groups in Palestinian territories or any militant conflicts in the Middle East affected the situation with anti-Semitism in Western part of the world, but not in our parts of the world. Previously, you can take the statistics of anti-Semitic acts in France, in Great Britain, in the United States, in Germany, in Netherlands, and according to numbers of anti-Semitic incidents, you can see, you can guess when there were some significant events around Israel. In Ukraine, in Russia, it wasn't so. You cannot guess, according to the statistics of anti-Semitic incidents, what happens in the Middle East. It was just no relation, no correlation between. And now in Russia, it is. We have seen this wave of anti-Semitic incidents in Muslim, in republics with Muslim population in Russia after October 7th. So Russia became part of this context of anti-Israel militant anti-Semitism, which is related to the situation of the Middle East, not in Ukraine. In Russia, we have seen the usage of anti-Semitic rhetoric by the political leadership of the country, including the Russian de facto leader Vladimir Putin himself. It was not so previously. I remember in the year of 2000, when Vladimir Putin became a president, that there was a kind of expectation, especially among those old-style anti-Soviet experts, Jewish experts as well, with the experience of struggle against Soviet anti-Semitism, that Vladimir Putin, just because of his origins from the KGB, with strong anti-Semitic culture, that he has these anti-Semitic views, that he will provide any kind of anti-Semitic politics just because of his origins, just because of his culture of professional socialization, just because of his roots and his experience. I remember even that the Russian Jewish Congress 25 years ago, the president of the Russian Jewish Congress was Vladimir Gusinsky. And he expected that anti-Semitism will be used against him because he was a supporter of some opponents of Vladimir Putin. And to be prepared for this, he even negotiate with the Anti-Defamation League, the main American and probably the main world organization which struggle against anti-Semitism, to open office in Moscow because the situation will change. But he wasn't right. Yes, he was a target of attacks, and he was he lost this battle against Vladimir Putin very quickly, very dramatically. Putin oppressed any kind of opposition very quickly after he got the power. But anti-Semitism wasn't used against Vladimir Putinski. Moreover, in the first year of his presidency, in the year of 2000, Vladimir Putin attended the place of future Jewish community center in Marina Rossa, which was built by Chabad. He participated in some Jewish events like in Hanukkah or even on Rosh Hashanah. He told in his kind of memories about his childhood, about some sentiments with his neighbors, old Jewish family, and something like this. So to be short, Vladimir Putin, with his personal political culture and in his political behavior, wasn't an anti-Semite. And it was his platform for more than 20 years, but something was changed. After the beginning of large-scale aggression, Vladimir Putin, step by step, began to use this anti-Semitic vocabulary. He began to make some ugly jokes about Jewish names or something like this. And he came to the situation when in the latest interview or large event dedicated to the results of the year of 2024 in December, this several hours interviews, questions and answers sessions, he used openly direct anti-Semitic statements, and it seems to be a kind of logical part of his political behavior. So what was changed? And Vladimir Putin is, of course, the only one, but the most important example. We can see the same evolution, an example of Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Maria Zakharova. A lot of Russian officials of high rank, like the deputy head of the Security Council, who published terrible article in the most popular newspaper, Komsomolskaya Pravda, when he told about the satanic Chabad Jewish sect, which from this conspiracy theory point of view, take a power in Ukraine and something like this. So there are a lot of examples, and the public person whose work is propaganda from prominent top propagandists like Vladimir Solovyov or Margarita Simonyan to the editors of channels in Telegram, they became to use very openly and blatant anti-Semitic rhetoric. So and it creates the new context where the hatred against Jews became possible, and it provoked the situation which was triggered by the October 7th event and led to anti-Jewish, literally pogroms, like in Dagestan, in Makhachkala, in October 2023. What was changed and why it was changed? The answer is simple. It was changed because of the war. The war of aggression against Ukraine became a game changer in the area of anti-Semitism in Russia because of ethnicity of Vladimir Zelensky. Of course, it wasn't the only reason, but it was a kind of a trigger. The situation appeared to be not like the usual situation with the anti-Semitism. The usual situation when Jewish origins of some public person used against him, it is a situation when the opponents of this political figure try to use anti-Semitic stereotypes, anti-Semitic prejudices against the person by create an association between him and these anti-Jewish feelings. Sometimes person could not be Jew by his origins, but because of anti-Semitic conspirological way of thinking, he could be blamed that he actually is a Jew, or at least his wife is Jewish, or something like this. And it is enough to create the links between him and between the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories or whatever. It's how does it work all over the world. The China's propaganda tells us that the Donald Trump's anti-China's politics is such because of the Jewish relatives of Trump, and it is a result of Jewish plot against China. The in Muslim world, and the statements that someone has a Jewish origins became a usual weapon against the opponents in political struggle. Ahmad al-Shara, the leader of Syria, was blamed that he actually is a Jew in Iranian propaganda, and any figure in Muslim world could be blamed that he actually is a Jew, like Mubarak in Egypt in times of Arab Spring revolution against Mubarak. So it is how does it work usually. It was how it works, how it worked in Ukraine in times of Petro Poroshenko presidency, when his opponents distribute some rumors that he actually is not Poroshenko, his real surname is Waltzman, and it is his Jewish origins, why he is so successful in business and politics and so on. Petro Poroshenko has no Jewish roots in reality, but Vladimir Zelensky actually has. And in Russian propaganda, where previously there were no anti-Semitic statements, I mean in the official state level, in the state ideology. It is not kind of official proclaimed state ideology in Russia, but of course it is a kind of package of ideological statements which work as an official Russian state ideology. And there were no anti-Semitic statements in the Russian state ideology previously. But even the Jewish origins of Zelensky in the very beginning of his presidency in 2019 were something good from the Russian propagandistic point of view, because in Kremlin they thought that this guy from Kryvyi Rih, from Russian-speaking family, with his Jewish parents, he seems to be not so Ukrainian nationalistic, indoctrinated guy as Poroshenko was. So it will be easier to deal with him. It will be easier to push him for some way of reconciliation with Russia or something like this, because he was not influenced by the Ukrainian nationalistic propaganda. It was the Kremlin's point of view in 2019, but Zelensky appeared not to be pro-Russian just because of his Jewish origins. And of course, it's a simple way to put this evolution, but the Kremlin became angry about Vladimir Zelensky because he is a Jew, but he appeared to be a Ukrainian nationalist. From Kremlin point of view, anyone who see any value in the Ukrainian independence is a Ukrainian nationalist. And when an ethnic Jew appeared in this position, his Jewishness, his Jewish roots, appears a source of trigger of a special anger. So in Russia, these usual links between negative feeling and anti-Semitism and Jewish origins played in different sides. The fact that the ethnic Jew became a leader of independent Ukraine and his struggles for Ukrainians' independence creates a situation when his Ukrainian patriotism affects the Russians' attitudes to the Jewish people as a whole. The fact that the ethnic Jews is a Ukrainian president, and anything which related to the struggle for the Ukrainian independence became toxic in Russian propaganda, the Jewish people became like guilty for this struggle of the for the Ukrainian independence, and it opens the gate to the hell. It makes free all of anti-Semitic attitudes and prejudices which were covered previously. It allowed, like, it make possible to use any kind of anti-Semitic hate speech because it was interpreted like anti-Ukrainian. The level of incitement against Ukrainians changed the rules of what is possible in public rhetoric in Russia. And the president himself, de facto leader of Russia, I mean Vladimir Putin, he shows an example in his speeches where he used very vulgar wording against Jews, but not only against Jews, against Ukrainians, and in general. He created a new public culture of speaking because of the aggression, because he tries to speak with all those field commanders or so-called military correspondents. He tried to play the simple guy who talk on the same language with his people, and it creates a new culture of public statements. And if the president allows himself such kind of statements, of course, all the top public figures, propagandists, and so on, and spokesperson of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, Maria Zakharova, they became to allow themselves blatant and very vulgar speeches, wording in general, and in anti-Semitic speeches as well. I've described some of examples in the report, but of course I was not able to count any kind of anti-Semitic statements by Vladimir Solovyov or Margarita Simonyan for last 3 years, so it is only an examples. But what is important in this context is dynamic. The situation was not the same before the large-scale aggression. It appears to be as it is because of Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. And this dynamic is very quick, very dramatic, significant, quick, and it is. It seems to be only beginning, because on the example of Vladimir Putin, who began to talk about Vladimir Zelensky as a shame of Jewish people in summer of 2022, and now months ago in his press conference about the results of the year of 2024, he made a kind of conspiracy anti-Jewish statement about ethnic Jews who take power in Ukraine, and they don't have any sacred for them. They hate anything which is important for us and for majority of the Ukrainian people. It was a quote, and it even hard to explain what does he mean literally, who they. It's only Zelensky who has in Jewish ethnic origins in the leadership of Ukraine, but who they who take power in Ukraine. Again, it is only one of the examples, because there were some other statements, or there are statements by Sergei Lavrov about the Jew Blinken, who came to a Jew Zelensky, and that Western powers, they made a Jew Zelensky a Ukrainian leader for some their purpose, and so on. So it's a complete idea of Jewish plot, Jewish conspiracy, which became an official ideology of Russia since last almost 3 years. It is very quick and significant changing. And it is why the situation on the ground changed as well, why the crowd in Dagestan decided that it is possible to take control on the airport and to look for the Jews who came from Israel or something like this. It is why the level of anti-Semitic vandalism increased in Russia, and why some violent group tried to prepare terroristic acts against synagogues, or even made an attempt to make arsons against synagogues and so on. And we are, or not we are, but Russia is only in the beginning of these dramatic dynamics. And it is strange that this dynamic was invisible for the Western world. Western world was so focused on their own problems with the anti-Semitism after October 7th. It seems that no one made made a big deal from these dynamics in Russia, and I think it is a big deal. I think the situation for the Jewish community in Russia became very bad, and it is not the situation where the Jews felt themselves comfortable as it was previously. We had not a lot of, but some of reports that the Jews were discriminate in the taxi services, for example, in St. Petersburg or in Moscow, because of their some markers of Jewish identity after October 7th. Taxi drivers in St. Petersburg and Moscow mostly are people from Northern Caucasian republics, or a large number of them. So it was related to the religious attitudes, but whatever, it is not the situation which was in Russia before the large-scale aggression, and not the October 7th was the reason, but the impulses, signals which the society has from the top of the Russia's political leadership. Russia is not a free country. Anything which Russian population feels is allowed, which is possible, it is what their state, the government, told them that is possible. And anti-Semitism became something allowed, something possible in Russia. Of course, those individuals who were involved in riots in Makhachkala now are imprisoned, or some court decisions are in process, and they have a serious detainment. They detained for 8 years, some of them for 9 years. It is like the state take control after a period when they lost this control. But it is a situation like with Yevgeny Prigozhin, when the state was just afraid and that something was gone out of control. And later they made them their revenge, very brutal, but it was possible, the situation which was dangerous for the state. It was possible because the state allows it. And the situation with anti-Semitism is the same. And it is also very interesting how easy the public opinion was changed after the changings of the rhetoric of political leadership of Russia. Before the large-scale aggression, The sociological research in Russia shows that majority of the population in a Middle East situation had more sympathy for Israel, not for Palestinians. Again, I will not remain the exact numbers, but majority answered that it is Palestinians who are responsible for the violence, not Israel. The situation was changed after 2022, after the large-scale aggression and the changing of the rhetoric of the political leadership. But what is more important is that majority of Russians, according to sociological reports, more Russians think that blamed Israel for violence on the Middle East than Palestinian groups or Hamas. But even more Russians blames the United States and NATO for violence on the Middle East. And it made clear how does it work in the propaganda after the large-scale aggression against Ukraine. And the political map of the globe became black and white for the Russian population. It is the West, and most of Russian population have an opinion that the war in Ukraine is the war against the West. So the West is the enemy. And the rest of the world, which is the global majority, as Sergei Lavrov calls it, they are more or less anti-Western as well. So they are more or less support Russia, according to the Russian official ideology. It is BRICS countries or Global South or whatever, non-Western countries. And West is the enemy in a very, very brutal polarization it's a kind of, I don't know, religious dualism. It's a kind of Manichaean religion where our enemies is an absolute evil and we are like absolute good. And Israel, of course, is the part of the West from the Russian point of view. It is the ally of the United States. In this context, the Jewish origins of Vladimir Zelensky and the fact that Ukraine, especially right after the October 7th, shows its solidarity with Israel, all those in complex became made very clear this black and white picture for the Russian population, and Israel became the enemy. It became the part of the Western world, and Russia struggled against the Western world. So very easy, like this, turn on and turn off of the hatred, because how does it work with the xenophobia? The Russian population, majority of Russian population, became anti-Israeli, and the anti-Semitism finds its logical place in this new picture. And the war of aggression against Ukraine was a reason of this shift. And this shift was and still is underestimated by the foreign observers, by the Western observers. I think it is important to talk about this situation in the United States, especially because the United States is the most important country in the world. And also because the new administration is only in the process of studying the Russian situation, the situation with the war, and the Jewish issue definitely is important for the new administration. Combating against anti-Semitism is important for the new administration. I think that this approach of the situation in Russia is important to be, at least to be known by the new US administration, to make the picture of the what today Russia is like complete. And now back to Ukraine. What dynamics and what changings we have in Ukraine during the last 3 years? I will keep it in brief, partly because the changings was not as dramatic as it were in Russia, partly because I've already talked too long. The major trends which were in Ukraine before the large-scale aggression were like less and less cases of anti-Semitic vandalism, and at least 0 cases of anti-Semitic violence. It was not so simple, and this dynamics was not direct in the some local context. For example, during the pandemic of COVID-19 in Uman, which is the center of pilgrimage of ultra-Orthodox members of Jewish community every year in the beginning of the autumn, Rosh Hashanah, on the Jewish religious New Year. And in the context of the COVID hysteria, there were some waves of propaganda against pilgrimage, because the religious Jewish community was shown as a source of danger because of COVID. So there were even some cases of violence against Hasidic pilgrims in Uman, but it is a local, very specific context. In general, we had no cases of anti-Semitic violence in Ukraine during last years. The very fact that the ethnic Jew became a president of Ukraine with support of almost 75% of voters, 74 something, it speaks for itself. Not, of course, the Ukrainian voters supported Vladimir Zelensky not because he is a Jew, but it also important that his Jewish origins was not an issue during the presidential campaign. And now Ukrainian society appeared in a situation when the president of the country and the head commander of the Ukrainian army is an ethnic Jew. Never in the Ukrainian history, the Ukrainian people were so consolidated, were so united as it is now. For last, not only for last century, for last centuries, every European war for Ukrainian people was a kind of a civil war, because Ukraine, without its own state, was devoted for different sides of First World War, During the Second World War, the situation was even more complicated. And I don't know, from the times of Napoleon War or from the times of Bogdan Khmelnytsky or Mazepa, Ukrainians were devoted for different sides of different powers which tried to control this territory. Only now, the Ukrainian people in their own country defend their own existence. They became more consolidated than ever in their history. And they consolidated around a symbolic leader, under the symbolic leadership of an ethnic Jew. So it's a completely made different the situation, the attitudes of the role of Jews in contemporary Ukraine. Of course, it is possible because the Ukrainian identity is not ethnocentric. The Ukraine was able, the Ukraine as a state, I mean, was able to create a type of civil identity, civil understanding of what nation is, not ethnocentric. Of course, it's always different trends and different elements in, I don't know, history, politics of history or in culture. But in general, our Ukrainian identity became civic, not ethnocentric. And it made the situation when the ethnic Jew became a leader of our country, but it changed everything in Ukrainian Jewish relations. So, and we can see it in the sociological research. We can see it on monitoring of anti-Semitic hate crimes. We have now the historical minimum of anti-Semitic hate crimes in Ukraine, at least for last 25 years, when we had made a systematic monitoring. We had 3 cases per year in the year of 2024, 2023. In 2024, we had 5 cases, which was a minimum in compare with previous 20 years. So it's several cases of anti-Semitic vandalism per year. And the last case of anti-Semitic violence we had in the year of 2022. It was not a clear anti-Semitic incident, but we will count it. Let it be the only one. 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago, in March of 2022. To compare, in Russia, the number of anti-Semitic vandalism began to grow in 2022, which means before the October 7th of 2023, and not because of October 7th, but because of the war of aggression against Ukraine. The war against Ukraine became a source of anti-Semitism in Russia, and in Ukraine it became the source of consolidation of all the Ukrainians with any ethnic ground or any religious belonging, and it means less anti-Semitic manifestations than we had previously. I will not talk about Israel and attitudes about Israel, because I think in this sphere everything is clear. Talking to our Western colleagues or observers, it is even not so easy to describe the absence of anti-Semitic manifestations after October 7th in Ukraine. We had no pro-Palestinian, not only public manifestations. I could say that we had some limitation of public gathering because of martial law, but actually we had pro-Israel public manifestations and public gathering after October 7th, but no anti-Israel, no one. We had a lot of visible manifestations of solidarity with Israel, starting with the Israel flags on advertising billboards and light boxes in Kyiv and other cities of Ukraine, and some in local neighborhood in Kyiv where I live, the simple library, like just a library on an area waved Israel flag after October 7th. I don't know, was it just a local initiative or whatever, but I have seen it. And for last year and a half, I had seen no one Palestinian flags in Ukrainian public places. It is so different with the situation, I don't know, in Warsaw or in Budapest, even, not even saying about Paris or London or Washington or New York. It is so different that it is even hard to explain for our foreign colleagues that the situation in Ukraine looks like. Of course, the solidarity with Israel also is because of our war, because Israel enemies are allies of our enemy, Iran and others, you know it. So it is not hard to understand why the situation is so, but it is important to stress that this solidarity with Israel is still very strong despite the position of Israeli government, which has not supported Ukraine, at least as the Western countries are. So actually the Russians' point of view is not only xenophobic, but it is factually wrong. Israel is not part of the Western coalition countries in their support of Ukraine. But despite this fact, the solidarity with Israel in the Ukrainian public mood is still strong, and it seems that it will not change in the nearest future. But not to be too optimistic, I want to stress some recent trends which could be source of concern in the nearest future about anti-Semitism in Ukraine. And it is also related to the general situation and the recent developments. We had very unpleasant but very intensive discussion during last Hanukkah in social networks about the Jewish symbols in public places in Kyiv and in other places. And we had some acts of vandalism against the menorah Jewish celebration candles on which lights on a Hanukkah week in the last days of December, first day even of January this year. and we had already the first act of anti-Semitic vandalism in the year of 2025 on January 1st against the Hanukkah in Lviv. So we had 3 cases of anti-Semitic vandalism last year, 3 cases the year before, and already 1 case during this January already. But it is not only about Hanukkah. The Hanukkah menorahs always were a target for anti-Semites. I guess not in Ukraine only because of their visibility. It is probably the only Jewish religious holiday when the visibility of the Jewish religion in public places are important for the Jewish community. So it's kind of a trigger for anti-Semites all over the world. But in this story about the discussion, which was initiated by a public figure, a singer, Katychili, on a Facebook social network, it was how a lot of people in social networks supports some anti-Semitic statements that there is no place for Jewish symbols in our public space because our national identity is now under the threat. We struggle for our existence, for our identity. The Russian aggression is against our national identity, so we need to fortify our national identity. We need to see only our Ukrainian national symbols in our Ukrainian public spaces, in Ukrainian capital and whatever. What does it mean? It means that the identity which feels to be threatened react in an aggressive way. It is how xenophobia in general works. When people don't estimate their aggression as aggression, they estimate it as self-defense. And in a more general frameworks, it means that the Ukrainian society in general is very vulnerable. It feels that their identity, people feel that their identity is under the existential threat, and they react aggressively because they feel this danger, because they think it is self-defense of their identity. After almost 3 years of large-scale aggression, in a situation when we feel that the Western partners don't be trusted, when the changes in the US politics could mean for us the peace, which possibly will be more like capitulation for Ukraine, it provokes uncertainty, and this uncertainty in this sphere could mean also some aggressive xenophobic reaction or anti-Semitic reaction. The future of negotiations and possible hypothetical peace talks could also be a source of threat in this sense. What I mean is it is okay for our society that Vladimir Zelensky is an ethnic Jew when he is a leader of a state of society which struggle for its independence and very existence. But if he will be, if/when, he will be a president which will sign the act of capitulation, his ethnic origins probably could be a source of additional hatred for a large part of the society, not because of his origins, but because of the level of frustration, because of the level of uncertainty and this feeling of the threat of the very existence of the Ukrainian people. So to make long story short, as we could see in all this story about the dynamics of anti-Semitism in Russia, about the dynamics of anti-Semitism in Ukraine, the general context means everything for dynamics of anti-Semitism. If the future of Ukraine could be problematic, if not a disaster, it could be also a source of concern about the future of anti-Semitism in Ukraine, if there will be any Ukraine there. I hope it will not be our issue, but I see here something which we should be aware of. So to conclude, and I again remind you that you can read the whole report with all the facts which I had not told you during last year, hour and a half, on the report by the link. To conclude, it is important to continue at least pay attention to the situation with anti-Semitism in Russia and Ukraine. And the situation with anti-Semitism in Russia is bad, dangerous, and the dynamic is catastrophic. And I think it is important to be known. It is this story should be told, and the new US administration should be aware about it. To be honest, I think it is a kind of language to communicate the situation in Russia with the new US administration. It is not a good idea to communicate about the human rights situation. It doesn't seem that human rights will be so for the new administration as it was for the previous one. But some issues like religious freedom or like anti-Semitism could be a key for communication with the new administration. So I hope that the issue with the Jewish community in Russia will be part of this communication for the whole picture to be described for the new administration about our situation. The situation to conclude the story about anti-Semitism in Ukraine, the general context means everything, and the situation with anti-Semitism is far from bad in Ukraine, but it could be worse if the general situation will be worse. So the Ukrainian future, the Ukrainian peace and Ukrainian victory could be the way to keep the situation with anti-Semitism as good as it is for now. Ukrainian disaster, Ukrainian capitulation definitely will change the situation to the worse. Thank you. We'll also put in chat box the link to the Ukrainian version of the report, and I'll try to answer your questions if you have ones, or if you have some times and inspiration, we can have a brief discussion about the issue. Thank you.
I would like to add, thank you, Slava, for such a great presentation, and it gave me a lot of like space to think of what else we can do further on. On behalf of the organization, I can say that we are planning to share this report with the United States Commission on Religious Freedom, and they generally public it they collect data from different sources to make their own report. Hopefully they're going to take this information, because the report does contain a lot of factual references, and it's very easy to actually fact check them. And we're definitely going to spread it to other nonprofits whom we work with, who is interested in the freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. Our organization is a member of the International Religious Freedom Roundtable, and it's like a great movement here in Washington, D.C., where we are going to promote the report as well. Following recent, an executive order Trump has recently signed to combat anti-Semitism in the United States. It definitely concerns the anti-Semitic agenda on the campuses. However, understanding that it is like a point of interest of the new president, probably we might be able to route this topic for the foreign aid as well. As you might probably know, all foreign aid from the United States is currently being frozen for unknown period of time. Nevertheless, we hope that in the nearest future, programs such as this might be supported not only by the United States government, but also by other private foundations that might find this topic of their interest. And thanks to this work, we have a very good, reliable information and ground on which we can develop our programs like that. Thank you very much.
I would like also to say many thanks to Vyacheslav and the rest of people who were involved in preparing this report. It's fascinating information, really describing the picture. And if I may, I would like to ask a question. I'm based in Jerusalem, and I'm monitoring the Ukrainian Telegram channels. And I noticed that from the beginning of the large-scale aggression, you can notice that in several Ukrainian Telegram channels, especially connected to the military circles and to the volunteer circles, I noticed some kind of rise of, let's say, some neo-Nazi cultural codes, some word plays and so on. But very important that they are not used as for hate speech. They are used like ironically or maybe even post-ironically, as it is going on in social media today. Can you refer, please, to that? Is it a problem at all? I am often asked about how to understand this. Maybe we should not consider it as a problem. Maybe we should consider it as a kind of, postmodern cultural phenomenon, and that's it.
I don't know the answer. I also had not a kind of position about it. I know you mean, definitely. And it is also not only in wording, but it is also in symbols, which could be more problematic because it could be shown in some visible public context and some foreign observers can pay attention for some symbols like dead head or like this Third Reich imperial eagle with the Ukrainian symbol in his the place where swastika was in Third Reich and so on. I don't know. I don't have an answer. It could be problematic because it creates space where such kind of statements could be welcomed. It is not ideological propaganda yet, but it creates some frames where such propaganda is possible. We don't really have a normal political life now, but probably hypothetically, if there will be some peace negotiations, some kind of agreement, it definitely will be elections right after, probably till end of the year. And we will see how it will work when it will be a political competition. And talking about anti-Semitism, how all the opponents of the current president will use or will not use this background, this framework against Vladimir Zelensky. Yet it does not play like this. We don't really have some anti-Semitic propaganda on this background. In Telegram channels, everything is possible. And there are some channels with, I don't know, dozens of subscribers where such propaganda exists. We even have some Islamistic channels or channels by Hizb ut-Tahrir party, and they are in line of this world anti-Zionist context. But again, we talk about channels with dozens of subscribers. It is not a really public issue. For now, I think that it is literally not important what kind of symbols were people who struggle for the Ukrainian independence, or what kind of wording use people who work on frontline or volunteering around frontline, because not their symbols are something which can literally kill us every moment. And this night, the night before this night, and the night before this night, I've heard how the missiles, which probably now are Russians, but were made on the technology of Iranian missiles, barraging around the area, and our military services trying to counteract them literally every night. And it is not the dead head symbol on a uniform of any Ukrainian soldiers which can kill me, but this Iranian missile or Iranian drones or whatever. So for now, it is not important at all. It could be an issue after the war, and it probably will be an issue after the war. I don't know. It depends on how the war will end. So it depends on the general context. Again, for now, it is, for me, only the thing which could be bad for visible image for foreign observers, but I will not overestimate it, because even when such photos are used against Ukraine in public propaganda, such photos or such symbols are not the reason of the anti-Ukrainian positions, but it only the propagandistic weapon which was instrumentalized against Ukraine, as for me. So, but I don't have an answer. I don't think, of course, I wish not to see such symbols on Ukrainian soldiers. But it is not a problem to communicate with a Ukrainian soldier with such a symbols for me personally. And in some situation, I was in some situation like this, and it was not problematic for me. I don't know, maybe it is not a kind of a strong public position. It's more about personal emotional feelings. I guess it will be more important as a political factor after the war, and probably we will return to this question.
Thank you so much. Absolutely agree with you. Maybe some more questions?
May I? Hello, Slava. It's nice to see you, and thank you so much for the presentation and all reports which you produced during all those years. And I have two questions. One is about Russia. There's always the conversation and information about the European part of Russia, and of course, center, Moscow, St. Petersburg. Is there any information about the anti-Semitism in Asian part of Russia? What about Yakutia, Buryatia, Far East? What is the situation there? And the second question is about Ukraine. How the we can observe, and also thanks to your reports, we see that the anti-Semitism in Ukraine really almost vanishing. But what is about general xenophobia? For instance, anti-Gypsyism in Ukraine. What is, if we compare with the anti-Semitism, I mean, it's not really a comparison, but I mean, do we have also this tendency to decrease xenophobia in Ukraine for the last years? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I will begin with the latest one. The short answer is the general level of xenophobia in Ukraine is more or less in line with the general dynamics about anti-Semitism. Talking about anti-Gypsians, or called the anti-Jews against Roma people, probably Roma people are in the top of xenophobia rating among other ethnic groups in Ukraine. But talking about hate crimes, we had maximum of anti-Roma hate violence in 2018. I can say it based on monitoring of general hate crimes. We don't have such monitoring since the large-scale aggression as well, but I'm in a constant communication with the Roma organizations. By the way, literally today, I was on some meeting with my Roma colleagues from Zaporizhia. So we are in dialogue and we exchange information. They had some more cases of anti-Gypsy, anti-Roma violence in the very beginning of large-scale aggression because of large movements of people, and some Roma families who became IDPs were less welcomed in some communities than other IDPs. So there were some cases in the first months of large-scale aggression, but now situation is much more better, and we don't have anti-Roma violence even on the level we had before the large-scale aggression. And as I said, the maximum anti-Roma cases we had in almost 7 years ago, something like this. Other anti-Semitic, other xenophobic forms of xenophobia also became less widespread in the society in the context of the Russian aggression, like anti-Muslim views, Islamophobia, which were in relation with Crimean Tatars since 2014, when Crimean Tatars appears in the Ukrainian public sphere as allies of the Ukrainian identity and as supporters on the Ukrainian sovereignty in Crimea. So the context, the framework of their appearance as IDPs from Crimea in larger part of governmental control Ukrainian territory was very positive, and it impacts the general attitudes about Muslims. So the level of Islamophobia also became better in Ukraine. It was not like you or support Jews or support Muslims. In the context of Russian aggression, both of types of xenophobia became just not relevant. Of course, the level of xenophobia against ethnic Russians, against Russian speakers, and against everything which are linked to Russia, including the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, it became more stronger, more violent sometimes, of course. So it is like this type of xenophobia became welcomed in the society, but other types of traditional xenophobia, forms of xenophobia, became less important for the Ukrainian society, and we can see it in different fields, but we have sociological research by the Kievan International Institute of Sociology, which every year makes research on social distance to different ethnic groups, so-called Bagartus scale, and we can see that the attitudes for different ethnic groups became more tolerant. The first push was in 2014, and in 2022 it was like second step. The Ukrainian society became more consolidated, more solidarity, and more I don't know, like brotherhood became more stronger in Ukrainian society, and it is not like an image. It's we can say according to the sociological research. It also can change after the war, but now it is a way of Ukrainian society cohesion, I think, something like this. About the Russian eastern regions, the short answer, we don't have enough information. And it was what was problematic for me during the work on this report is that we have something in public sphere, in like news Telegram channels or in social media, but we don't know how it is, how it reflects the real situation on the ground in Russia. And I don't know, it is the only way to check it is to have boots on the ground, to make a proper monitoring of anti-Semitism or whatever in Russia. We should have monitors in Russia. You don't feel the social mood, you don't feel the social atmosphere, even with all the social networks and so on. I remember that there were some acts of anti-Semitic vandalism in Magadan, in Yakutia, but previously, before the large-scale aggression, during last 3 years, I don't remember any incidents in the eastern part, Asian part of Russia. There are some Jewish objects there, but I don't remember. Probably because they were not known, were not became public. Probably there were no one. I don't know, but no, I don't remember any case.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, it is almost 10 o'clock now in Kiev, and I must say that unfortunately we have no time for more questions. I believe that every question you can write and send to Vyacheslav directly or to Studio Diye-Slovo, and we will resend it. Thank you so much for this report and for this evening, and well, our warmest greetings for the finishing of that work, and our best support with Kiev and with Ukraine. Have a good and calm night. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, will we get the access to the reports? Will you send us the link?
I've sent the link to the Russian
Yeah.
and English version in the very beginning, and I've
okay.
sent already the Ukrainian version as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't don't end the thing that I copied. By the way, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and for your information, the rate of anti-Semitism since the 7th of October raised 750%, above more than 750%.
I have read the report of the Executive Council of Australian Jury, so yes, I know about the situation in Australia.
Shocking. Yeah, I can't believe this is the case, and Ukraine is like a good example of coexistence. Of course, anti-Semitism, and I'm very grateful for your presentation, your profound knowledge, and most importantly, your intellectual honesty. This is very important.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, yeah, have a blessed day. Be well, looking forward. Are you on Facebook? We can connect if you wish.
The same name you've seen on the screen, which is of Likhachev. You can find it.
Okay, I will connect with you. Thanks a lot. Be well. God bless. And hopefully we will see the peace in the world very soon. Good night. Thank you. And
All the best.